Avoid this mistake if you want to stop wasting time and energy on people who only hold you back. Did you know that certain individuals could be subtly sabotaging your progress without you even noticing? In today's video, we're going to uncover the 9 types of people you should never trust or respect based on pragmatism philosophy. These are the ones who thrive on keeping things stuck in place. Stick around to learn how to spot them and avoid getting caught in their web of stagnation. Number 1. Theorists who never take action. There's a certain type of person we all know, someone who is full of ideas, full of concepts, full of theories, but when it comes down to actually doing something with all of that knowledge, nothing happens. Have you ever been in a conversation where someone goes on and on about how things should be, about how the world ought to function, but when asked about the steps they're taking to make it happen, they always have an excuse? The kind of people who love talking about the perfect way to achieve something, but the moment they need to put in the work, they freeze. It's easy to get swept up in the excitement of ideas, in the euphoria of possibilities, but as the great pragmatists like William James often pointed out, it's what we do with those ideas that really counts. Ideas are like seeds. They have the potential to grow into something great. But if you leave them in the soil and never water them, they'll never bloom. This concept hits home when we start reflecting on our own lives. We all have ideas. We all want to change things, improve things, or create something new. But when it's time to roll up our sleeves and make it happen, do we always act? Or do we find ourselves stuck in a loop of perfect plans and endless brainstorming without moving forward? That feeling of nostalgia creeps in, doesn't it? You've probably been there, back in high school or college, hearing about big dreams from classmates who swore they would change the world, but years later, they're still telling the same stories, still sharing the same plans. There's a certain sadness to it. You realize that no matter how brilliant the theory, it's meaningless without action, and it makes you wonder how many great ideas never came to life because people were too comfortable dreaming, too afraid to start. But why is it that so many people get stuck in this cycle? It's curious, isn't it? If we know that action leads to results, why do we often delay taking that first step? Pragmatism tells us that theory without application isn't just ineffective, it's irrelevant. The world doesn't need more theorists who never act. It needs doers, people who are willing to get their hands dirty and experiment with what works and what doesn't. It's not about creating the perfect plan before you start. It's about starting, learning, adapting, and improving. But we're conditioned, aren't we? We've been told that ideas are the gold, that having a big dream is what matters most. But maybe, just maybe, it's the ones who roll up their sleeves and make things happen who truly hold the power. So, the question is, are you a theorist, or are you someone who turns their thoughts into reality? Number 2. Avoiders of responsibility. There's another type of person that many of us have encountered, those who can never seem to take responsibility for their actions, whether it's in a work environment, among friends, or even in family situations. These are the people who constantly shift the blame, always pointing fingers at someone else. Remember that feeling of frustration you've had when you know someone messed up, but instead of owning up to it, they made excuses, redirected the blame, or pretended it never happened. It's one of those moments when your gut just tells you something isn't right, and yet, there they are, smiling, avoiding the consequences of their actions, and continuing on as if nothing ever occurred. It's one of those scenarios that makes you stop and wonder, how do they get away with this? Now, think about your own experiences. Maybe you've been in a situation at work or school or in a personal relationship where you were expected to step up, take charge and fix something, but then someone else stepped in and passed the buck. It feels familiar, doesn't it? A bit nostalgic even. Those moments when you were left holding the bag while others sailed through, free of responsibility. The frustration from those experiences is often the same. It feels like you're the only one who cares about doing the right thing, and everyone else just wants to slide by without facing any consequences. You probably recall a time when you felt like the weight of responsibility was all on your shoulders, while others around you coasted. And honestly, it probably still stings a little. But why do people avoid responsibility? It's almost as if the fear of failure, the fear of making a mistake, outweighs the drive to succeed. It's curious, isn't it? Because pragmatism teaches us that taking responsibility, whether for successes or failures, is a crucial part of growth. In the real world, avoiding responsibility leads nowhere. When people refuse to take ownership, not only do they stunt their own growth, but they also create chaos in the systems around them. Every time someone avoids responsibility, they take away an opportunity to learn, improve, and actually make a difference. But why does it seem so difficult for some to step up and own their actions? What is it about personal accountability that makes people squirm? Maybe it's because facing up to our mistakes and shortcomings is uncomfortable, but discomfort is where growth happens. Without responsibility, there's no real progress. It's a paradox, isn't it? The very thing people avoid is the one thing that could propel them forward. Number 3. People who resist change. Now let's talk about the type of person who seems to always fight change, even when it's clear that progress is inevitable. These are the people who hold on to the status quo with an iron grip, who say, "But this is how we've always done it," as if that's somehow a valid reason to reject new ideas. Whether it's in the workplace, in politics, or in everyday life, there are those who resist anything new, anything different, and anything that might challenge their deeply ingrained comfort zone. There's an almost nostalgic sense to it, isn't there? We've all experienced the person who won't update their systems, their processes, or even their thinking. Remember those people who refuse to embrace new technology or new ways of doing things simply because they're scared of stepping into the unknown? It's like watching someone stay stuck in the past while the rest of the world moves forward. Think back to times in your life when change was on the horizon, whether it was a new job, a new place to live, or even just a shift in your routine. There's a familiar feeling that comes with it. Maybe you've encountered people who tried to convince you that things didn't need to change, that staying the same was better, safer, and more predictable. And let's be honest, there's comfort in that. After all, change can be uncomfortable, and who doesn't enjoy the familiar? But here's the catch. Growth doesn't happen without change. Pragmatism, in all its glory, encourages us to adapt and evolve. Without the willingness to embrace change, we stay stagnant, and progress, personal, professional, societal, becomes impossible. But why do some people resist change so fiercely? It's almost as if the fear of the unknown is greater than the possibility of something better. Curious, isn't it? Pragmatism teaches us that the world is constantly in motion, and if we want to thrive, we need to adjust to its changing tides. People who resist change may think they're protecting themselves, but in reality, they're limiting their potential. It's not about blind change for the sake of it. It's about being open to new ideas, new methods, and new opportunities. And isn't that what we all want in the end? To keep moving forward, to keep improving, to keep evolving. The question is, are you holding on to the past, or are you ready to embrace what comes next? Number 4, problem-focused, solution-less. There's a certain kind of person who seems to excel at identifying problems, pointing out flaws, and highlighting every single obstacle in their path. But when it comes to offering solutions, they're nowhere to be found. It's a frustrating experience, right? You've been in those situations where someone constantly complains about an issue, but never actually provides a way to fix it. They might spend hours talking about how bad something is, how things are falling apart, but when asked, "What can we do about it?" they're silent, or worse, they come up with excuses. It's a bit like walking into a room full of smoke, but never seeing the fire extinguisher. The problem's obvious, but the solution nowhere in sight. Reflect on times in your life when you've been part of a group project, or in a situation where everyone's focusing on the negative aspects of a problem. Remember how those people who keep pointing out what's wrong without offering a single solution just drain the energy from the room. It's that sense of helplessness, the feeling that all you're doing is discussing a never-ending cycle of problems without ever getting closer to a resolution. There's a certain nostalgia to this, right? We've all had those moments where we hoped for a breakthrough or a simple idea to move forward, but instead, we ended up stuck, going around in circles. The longer you stay in that environment, the more you begin to wonder, why is it so hard to focus on solutions instead of just rehashing the same problems over and over again? What's so curious about this behavior is that deep down, we all know that focusing solely on problems doesn't help anyone. It only prolongs the frustration and keeps people from moving forward. Pragmatism teaches us that we need to not only identify problems, but actively seek solutions. It's not enough to sit in a room complaining about how things aren't working. You have to ask yourself, what can be done? And if you're not offering any solutions, you're not contributing to progress. When people focus endlessly on problems and never offer ways to solve them, they only hinder growth. It's a curious cycle, one that can trap entire organizations, friendships, or even personal ambitions. But think about it. How many times have you been in situations where, instead of getting closer to a solution, you just keep listing more and more things that aren't working? The key is action, not just identification. The question is, how long will we let ourselves get stuck in the problem phase without ever moving toward a solution? Number 5. Self-interest over collective good. We all know someone who's always looking out for number 1, those who put their own needs, desires, and ambitions ahead of everyone else, no matter the cost. At first, it's easy to brush it off as just how the world works. After all, who doesn't want to look after themselves? But when this mentality becomes a pattern, when it starts to harm the collective, that's when it becomes a real issue. We've all witnessed it. Those who take credit for group efforts, who push others down to elevate themselves, or who make decisions that benefit themselves at the expense of the team. It's that sinking feeling you get when you realize that someone you trusted isn't interested in the greater good, only their own gain. It's unsettling, right? You might even feel a pang of nostalgia as you think back to those moments when you were part of something that was supposed to be about collaboration, but someone's selfish actions ruined it all. Think about it. When you were part of a team, whether it was a work project, a community event, or even a family plan, how did it feel when someone only cared about their success? Maybe you recall times when someone took advantage of others' hard work, leaving you feeling frustrated and taken for granted. It's a universal experience, one that many of us can relate to on some level. The collective good is a concept that is deeply ingrained in pragmatism. It's the understanding that progress doesn't come from selfishness. It comes from working together, from looking at what benefits the whole, not just the individual. It's about creating systems where everyone thrives, not just the few. But what's curious is that in a world where cooperation has proven to be key to success, why do some people still cling to self-interest at the expense of others? It's a paradox that leaves us questioning. Is personal success truly valuable if it comes at the cost of the community around us? Pragmatism reminds us that the most effective solutions are the ones that benefit everyone, not just an individual. The real question is, What are you willing to sacrifice for the collective good? The ones who consistently prioritize their own desires over the welfare of others, whether in small acts or large, slow down progress, disrupt harmony, and break trust. It's not always easy to recognize self-interest over collective good, especially in a society that often glorifies individual achievement. But when you take a step back and observe, you can see it clearly. So, what do we do about it? How do we shift the balance from selfishness to collaboration, from self-interest to collective responsibility? Number 6. Complicates of simple issues. There's another type of person that we all know, the one who seems to turn every small problem into a complicated mess. Have you ever been in a situation where something simple needed to be done, and someone came in and made it so much more complicated than it had to be? It's that feeling when you just want to move forward, but instead you're bogged down by endless details and unnecessary complexities. It could be a work task, a family issue, or even a simple conversation, and suddenly it becomes this drawn-out process that feels completely unnecessary. Do you remember a time when you thought, "Why is this so difficult?" The more you tried to simplify the issue, the more others tried to overcomplicate it. It's exhausting, isn't it? When you think back to those moments, you might even feel nostalgic about the times when things felt more straightforward. You probably recall moments when things seemed simple, when decisions were easier to make and actions flowed naturally. But then someone stepped in, throwing in unnecessary steps, creating confusion or overthinking every move. It's frustrating, isn't it? You find yourself wondering why people do this. Why do they insist on adding layers of complexity to something that could be easily solved? It's almost as if the simpler approach isn't enough for them, or maybe they believe that complexity somehow makes them appear more intelligent or important. What's curious about this is that pragmatism thrives on simplicity. It's not about making things harder than they need to be. It's about taking action in the most direct and effective way possible. The idea isn't to avoid complexities where they are necessary, but to strip away the unnecessary ones. Simplifying problems allows for quicker solutions, more effective results, and less frustration. Yet some people seem to resist this, making everything more complicated just for the sake of it. Why do they do this? Could it be a fear of simplicity, of missing something important? Or is it a desire to show off their knowledge by creating a more intricate solution, even when a simpler one would work just as well? It's a curious paradox, one that seems to plague so many situations. But when you think about it, the real question is, why make something complicated when simplicity is often the most powerful solution? Number 7. Perfectionists who stagnate progress. We've all encountered the perfectionist, the person who demands everything be flawless, who won't settle for anything less than perfect. At first, it's admirable, right? After all, who doesn't want things to be done well? But there's a dark side to perfectionism, one that quietly prevents progress and growth. You've probably been in a situation where you've worked on something, but someone, perhaps even you yourself, keeps tweaking and adjusting it, overanalyzing every detail, until eventually the project goes nowhere. The closer you get to your idea of perfection, the further away you get from finishing the task altogether. It's like chasing a mirage, always moving but never reaching the end. You're stuck, constantly improving but never actually completing anything. That feeling, frustrating, isn't it? Remember those moments in your life when you had a goal, a project, or an idea, and every time you made progress, you found a new detail to perfect. Maybe it was a presentation you were preparing, a video you were editing, or even just a piece of artwork you were working on. The more you tried to perfect it, the further away you got from being done. You know the feeling, right? You start to lose momentum, get tired, and eventually it feels like you're trapped in an endless loop of improvement, but never achieving the satisfaction of completion. This constant chasing of perfection, it steals your energy, your time, and worst of all, it steals your ability to move forward. It's almost as if you've been nostalgic for the simpler times when things were less complicated and you could actually finish something. How many things in your life have been left incomplete, always on the verge of perfection, but never quite there? What's curious about perfectionism is that while it's rooted in a desire for excellence, it often hinders actual achievement. Pragmatism teaches us that perfection isn't always attainable or even necessary. What matters is making progress, adapting as you go, and learning from the experience. Perfectionists often ignore this fundamental truth. They get so caught up in the idea of making something perfect that they forget the point is to get it done, to take action, and to improve as they move forward. In the process, they risk never finishing anything at all. Isn't it strange, though? The more you chase perfection, the more you stagnate. But why does perfectionism have such a strong hold on so many of us? Is it the fear of failure? The fear that what we create won't be good enough? Pragmatism offers a different approach. Do your best, but don't let perfection get in the way of progress. It's curious, but perhaps the true perfection lies not in an ideal outcome, but in the act of completing something and moving forward. So, why are we so afraid of letting go of that pursuit? Number 8. Deniers of real-world evidence. There's another troubling type of person, those who refuse to accept real-world evidence and deny things that are right in front of them. This type of person often bases their beliefs on what they want to believe, rather than what the facts actually show. You know the type, the ones who argue endlessly despite mountains of data, research, and experiences that contradict their beliefs. They stand firm in their position, even when reality stares them in the face. At first, it's baffling, isn't it? You wonder, how can they ignore such clear evidence? But the more you observe, the more you begin to see just how dangerous this mindset can be. It's that moment when you realize that stubbornness has clouded their judgment, and nothing will change their mind, no matter how much proof you present. It can feel helpless, frustrating, even isolating. Think back to the times when you've seen people ignore evidence, when their views were so rigid that no amount of logic or facts could shift their stance. It could have been in an argument, a discussion, or even in a social context. You probably remember the sense of disbelief, how, despite all the evidence in front of you, the other person refused to acknowledge what was clearly true. It's almost nostalgic in a way, isn't it? How often do we find ourselves reflecting on those moments, wondering if things would have turned out differently if people just acknowledged the facts? Whether it's about climate change, health, or even simple everyday truths, this denial of reality feels like a constant battle. And in those moments, there's a deep curiosity. Why do people hold on to beliefs that contradict reality? What drives them to cling to their ideas, despite the overwhelming evidence against them? The reason this is so frustrating is because pragmatism places such a strong emphasis on the importance of real-world evidence in shaping our beliefs and actions. It's through experience, through testing ideas in real-world conditions, that we learn what works and what doesn't. Dismissing this evidence leads to poor decisions and missed opportunities. But why do some people choose to ignore it? Is it because changing their minds would force them to confront uncomfortable truths? Or is it simply a lack of willingness to question their deeply held beliefs? It's a curious question, one that leaves us wondering what it would take to open their eyes to the truth. Pragmatism encourages us to look at the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. The real question is, how can we break through the walls of denial and embrace the power of evidence to guide our actions and decisions? Number 9. saboteurs of teamwork. And then there's the person who seems to have a knack for tearing down teamwork. You know, the one who always finds a way to sabotage progress, to undermine collaboration, or to create divisions where there should be unity. Maybe it's a colleague who plays one team member against another, or someone who manipulates situations to make themselves look better at the expense of others. It's not always obvious at first, but over time you begin to notice the subtle ways they disrupt harmony. They thrive on discord, on making others feel less confident, less capable, and more divided. And as a result, the whole team suffers. You've probably been in situations where a team was performing well, but one person's actions slowly began to derail the entire group. It's frustrating, isn't it? You start out with a sense of excitement, ready to collaborate and work toward a common goal, but someone's undermining efforts causes everything to fall apart. Think back to your own experiences with teamwork. We all remember those moments when things were going smoothly, the group was in sync, and everyone was working together. But then there's that one person, the one who subtly sows doubt, the one who shifts the narrative, and suddenly everything becomes difficult. It's that feeling of betrayal, of trust being broken. You've probably felt it before, the creeping frustration as the team's progress is sabotaged by one individual's actions. Nostalgia kicks in as you think about the times when working together felt effortless, when everyone had a role to play and success seemed inevitable. But then that sabotage, whether overt or subtle, ruined it all. You probably wonder, why would someone want to tear down something so good? It's curious, isn't it? Because in a world that thrives on collaboration, why would anyone actively work against the team? Pragmatism teaches us that teamwork, collaboration, and mutual respect are key to achieving shared goals. Working together toward a common goal produces results that individuals can never achieve alone. But when someone undermines the group effort, they not only disrupt progress, but also destroy trust and morale. The real question is, what drives these saboteurs to tear down collaboration? Is it insecurity, the need to feel superior, or a desire for control? And more importantly, how can we prevent these actions from derailing the progress that teamwork can bring? If you've watched this far, drop a thumbs up. This shows you're part of the 0.01% who truly finishes what they start. It's easy to get distracted by people who drag you down, but you've stayed focused and committed to learning how to avoid these energy-draining behaviors. That's the kind of mindset that sets you up for success. If you're serious about changing your life and surrounding yourself with the right people who push you forward, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Join us and stay tuned for more content that will help you grow, thrive, and take action in the direction of your goals.